Right, you guys, enough of this d4 opening stuff. Nobody likes the queen's gambit setup or the d4 opening, especially if you are an e4, e5 player. What response have I prepared for you to surprise d4 players? There is one unknown defense that I want to show you guys, which may also transpose into the advanced Polish defense that will confuse your opponents most of the times. So you begin with pawn to c6. I find this to be a very good weapon against the queen's gambit setup, and I mean these pawns. So to surprise your opponent, instead of going d5, try this, b5. Now I know I presented the first part of this tutorial in my last video that has popped up in the card above. So this is kind of the second part of that video. And so in today's lesson, I just intend to fill the gap where I left. Right. Trust me, this is very much playable even at the top level or beginner level. Try this in bullet. Oftentimes you are going to be finding yourself being up a pawn in the opening stage. Like for real, I'm not even joking. By now most of your opponents will pre-move knight c3, which allows you to get a free pawn immediately, and then out of shame they play e4, after which you can simply go d5, and that's it. That was just a free pawn, just like that. Unless white sees this stockfish move, which I doubt they will play. Bishop takes c4. You can just avoid taking the bishop and simply play pawn to e6. Here you are 100% safe. Even if bishop b5 check comes, you have bishop d7 anyway. So the beauty of this b5 move is to neutralize this queen's gambit pawn. And that's why the top played move is cb in this position. And after pawn to e4, you now play bishop b7. Theoretically speaking, center pawns are more valuable than flank pawns. So let's begin with bishop d3 in this position. So after this, you can go knight to f6. So you will see your opponents playing knight d2. And now you can simply go pawn to s6. How cool is this, you guys? By the way, for future reference, you can develop your queen's knight on d7 and move on with life. Anyway, so the main goal after taking on b5 is to play the queen's gambit declined now successfully with a well advanced pawn on b5. How is this different from the actual queen's gambit declined? White has no c pawn and you have already started expanding on the queen side, which is a plus. So once again, after e4 or even after pawn to e3, just go bishop b7. So just a reminder, we have two game plans. One, to play in the style of the Caro-Kann defense, and two, to play in the style of the Semi-Slav. Our first game plan may go as follows: c4, b5, cb, cb, and then instead of pawn to e4, the top played move, let's just say white continues to play the standard moves such as knight to f3. So now from here, the whole battle will be on the center of the board, precisely on e4 and on e5. These are the only squares you're going to be controlling with your d pawn and your light squared bishop, supported by your king's knight. For example, you can begin with knight to f6, a neutral move, keeping an eye on the e4 square, and after something like e3, a normal move, you first of all defend your pawn. These are all standard moves, by the way, played even at the top level. Let's just say bishop d3. Now there are two of white's supporters, so it is in this position where you can go the Caro-Kann way or simply the Semi-Slav way. So let me show you the Caro-Kann way first. This is where you go pawn to d5 immediately, because you have this in mind. If they play a4, you just advance your b pawn, and if they castle short, this is when you play bishop g4, knowing that there is no queen b3 to attack your b7 pawn, which they like doing most of the times, because I mean your pawns are well advanced on the queen side. And if they play h3, you can even take to simplify the game. After they take back, now you go pawn to e6, mission accomplished. From here, you are going to develop your dark squared bishop here and castle short. Then start fighting on the queen side, probably like this, or just putting your knight on c6 and then fight for the c4 square. Your queen's rook will come and sit on c8. Anyway, instead of playing d5 back on move 6, you can also go the Semi-Slav way with bishop b7. The idea is to support your king's knight with your light squared bishop after playing pawn to d5, and you will see how that works. For example, white here will castle short most of the times, and then you go d5 immediately if you want, but that makes no sense before playing e6, paving way for your dark squared bishop, because you are already controlling the e4 square with your knight and your bishop, so you're cool. The moment they play knight bd2, now you know they have more minor pieces controlling the e4 square, and maybe they would love to play e4 next. So this is when you go pawn to d5. stopping pawn to e4. Remember, the whole battle is on the center of the board, and to be specific, we're just talking of the e4 square and the e5 square. So this is what you want to control. Knight e5 will be met with knight bd7 and exchange, supported by your dark squared bishop. But anyways, after a4, you don't take, you just advance your pawn, that's all. And say after a5, because they don't want you to go a5 and solidify your pawns. But it's cool, even after this, you can just play bishop d6, normal moves. Knight e5 can be met with knight bd7 once again, and take that knight to simplify the game with your queen's knight. So why putting your light squared bishop behind your d pawn? Well, the thing is, you just want to put your knight on e4 and replace your d5 pawn with your light squared bishop. This is where your light squared bishop will sit. After something like knight b3, for example, then you go knight bd7 first, stopping knight e5, and then after something like bishop d2, this is when you can play knight e4, knowing that after bishop takes, you're simply going to achieve your dreams by replacing your d pawn with your light squared bishop. Now your light squared bishop becomes your big pawn on d5. This will annoy white most of the times, and this is how you can play the semi-Slav way. The other plan may go as follows: d4, c6, c4, b5, and now let's say white doesn't take to oversimplify the game, but they rather go e3. Well, in this case, you can just take. That's all. Once again, you can either go the Caro-Kann way with bishop g4 or bishop f5, or the Semi-Slav way. After bishop takes, d5, bishop d3, and e6. This is the Semi-Slav way once again, and it's even better than the actual Semi-Slav because your light squared bishop is free to be developed in no time, unlike in the Semi-Slav. Sometimes you can also put it on b7 and go pawn to c5 later in the middle game. But anyways, your king's knight will sit on f6, your queen's knight will sit on d7, and you will develop your dark squared bishop either on e7, d6, or even on b4, depending on the situation, and castle short, play pawn to h6, deal done. If you don't want to go the Semi-Slav way, you can delay the development of your e-pawn and rather go knight to f6 to wait for knight f3. For example, after knight to f6, the top played move is knight f3, and this is when you can develop your light squared bishop first, if need be, exchange it to oversimplify the game. After queen takes, you now go pawn to e6, and just like that, you got rid of your bad French bishop, and now ready to continue playing the game as highlighted. Sometimes they might stop you from going bishop g4. I mean, instead of playing knight to f3 just yet, you may see white going pawn to h3. This is also a move, but knowing that you don't have this possibility anymore, you can still go back to the Semi-Slav setup, and after knight to f3, this is when you play bishop e7. I'll probably give a check first to see what white is going to do. If bishop d2, you just take to simplify the game, and say after queen takes d2, now this is when you castle short, putting your king to safety, just simplifying the game. After castle short, you can also get rid of white's bishop like this, pinning this to the rook. So they have to take, after which you take back with your queen's knight, and then you're ready to put your knight on c7, queen d6, and continue playing chess. Or sometimes it's up to you to, develop your dark squared bishop on e7 instead of getting rid of it. So I'm just giving you many safe options that you can try. I don't want to limit you to one line to memorize. Nope. So two ways, either the Semi-Slav way or the Caro-Kann way. Right. Now those two plans that I just showed you are just safe lines that you may rely on in case the game doesn't go your way, because most of the times the game goes as follows: d4, c6, c4, b5, then cb, cb, and instead of knight to f3 or pawn to e3, white usually plays pawn to e4, so that after you play bishop b7 attacking this important pawn, this is when they play pawn to f3. By the way, if knight d2, you just go knight to f6, just like I demonstrated earlier, attacking this pawn. e5 doesn't make sense because now you can put your knight on a better outpost. An outpost is just a place where your knight cannot be attacked by your opponent's pawns, so this is a great outpost. If bishop takes, by the way, that wasn't a free pawn due to queen b6. Queen b6 is the only equalizing move here. You're attacking the bishop and also the pawn on d4. So there's nothing that white can do here to stop you from capturing any of these things. Just for example, bishop c4, and then you simply take. That's all. If knight to f3, you can just go back. And as you can see now, this is no longer the d4 opening that you see. You'll play pawn to e6, develop your dark squared bishop and castle short. Very safe stuff. And your main savior is this light squared bishop on b7. Very much playable even in classical tournaments. Anyway, if white doesn't play pawn to e5, and let's say they play bishop d3 just to support their important pawn, because it makes no sense to take, sacrificing this important pawn. Well, if you're not really comfortable to see your b5 pawn hanging, you can just go pawn to a6, just defending your pawn, that's all. This time e5 is even worse because of bishop takes g2. So if knight gf3 is played, now this is when you go pawn to e6. You're just having an equal game. Let them castle short so that you can develop your dark squared bishop and castle short as well. Anytime you see a4, just go pawn to b4, that's all. a5, you castle short. e5 is never a good option for white because you always have this beautiful outpost for your knight controlling these highlighted squares, hence limiting white's movements of his pieces. So just to make it clear, all I'm saying is once you play like this, you will have no any weaknesses and you'll just end up having a normal fight against a queen's pawn game. So once again, this was kind of a second part of my first video on this defense, which I published a few days ago, and the whole idea was just to fill the gap where I left and just to make you confident enough to play this defense.